Are
Have
you
you ever
both
wondered if
together, or is one
success
of you
and money
buying
can
the
truly
bread?
bring happiness? A young millionaire with everything the world can offer, but
Are
feeling
you both
lonely
together,
and empty
or is one of
inside.
you buying the bread?
Everything will change when he meets a family living in poverty, facing hardships, yet full of love. The story begins at a small store where two poor little girls with shining eyes stir the heart of a cold-hearted man. Can a simple act of kindness change the life of a wealthy man? Or is it just a fleeting moment? Join us as we follow the story of Heart Clara and her two daughters as they teach each other lessons about humanity, resilience, and connection. Things money can't buy. Hart is a young millionaire, one of the leading figures in the technology industry, who built his empire from scratch. His life is a series of numbers, contracts, and transactions meetings where only profit is ever discussed. No one can deny that Hart has achieved success. He owns a lavish penthouse on the top floor of a skyscraper, luxury cars, designer clothes, and all the material things that the world can offer to a wealthy person. But in this dazzling world, where money and power are the crown jewels, there is one thing that Hart has never found connection. He sits in his office gazing out the large window where the entire city unfolds under the pale yellow lights of the evening. From here, the city seems to shrink with the winding roads and skyscrapers blending together like pieces of a puzzle that he controls. Everything is perfect except for his heart. Despite being the head of a billion-dollar company with private jets and extravagant dinners, Hart still feels empty. He has never had a real family, never had anyone who truly cared for him other than his partners and employees. Love, care, or even a simple hug, things he only sees in movies or books, are foreign to him. Hart's company is a giant in the tech industry. He has worked tirelessly through his youth to achieve this success. People know him as a model of intelligence, decisiveness, and sometimes coldness. But behind that strong exterior, only he knows that all the things he owns cannot fill the emptiness in his heart. One morning, as the sunlight gently streams through the curtains, Hart wakes up in his vast room. He doesn't hurry to get out of bed as he normally would. Instead, he lies there on the king-sized bed staring at the ceiling. Thoughts intertwine in his mind, work calls, contracts to sign, deals to be made. Yet today, everything feels different. A strange feeling rises in his chest as if something is waiting for him outside the window. Finally, he gets up, walks to the window, and looks out. The city is as peaceful as any other day. But inside him, there's an inexplicable unease. In a small corner of a street in the outskirts of New York, Clara, a single mother, struggles to cut a piece of bread in the kitchen. The pain in her body makes it almost impossible for her to stand. Clara is a resilient mother. She has raised her two daughters, Nuna and Niece, under difficult circumstances. Their life has been nothing but hardships, but Clara always finds ways to create joyful moments for her daughters, whether it's a simple meal or a little game in the house. Clara once had a stable job at a large company, but when she became pregnant with Nuna and Niece, she was fired. No one wanted to keep a pregnant woman on their team, and Clara faced threats and isolation. From then on, she started working harder, taking on part-time jobs, from cleaning houses to serving in restaurants. But recently, Clara can no longer bear it. Illness has begun to attack her, making it impossible for her to work long hours. She knows she can't continue living this way. Her illness not only drains her energy, but also makes her dreams of a better life for her children slowly fade away. Every day, Clara prays for the strength to keep working to provide for her children. But she doesn't know what she will do if this situation continues. Nuna and Nice, the 8-year-old twin girls, are playing in their small living room. They look almost identical, with long black hair and bright eyes that shine like stars. Although they are only 8 years old, both of them understand that their lives are not easy. Nuna, the strong-willed one, always protects her sister Niece and tries to ensure that neither of them will ever go without. Nice is gentler, but she is also very intelligent and understanding. Both of them know their mother is sick and unable to work, and they have had to learn to take care of themselves from a very young age. One morning, while sitting in the kitchen, Nuna turns to Niece and asks, "Do you remember what Mom said yesterday?" "I remember," Niece replies. "Mom said that we have to help each other. But we can't keep living like this anymore." Nuna looks at her sister, her eyes filled with concern. "What are we going to do, Niece? We'll find a way." Nice smiles. "Mom will get better." Meanwhile, a luxury car slowly pulls up in front of a small grocery store. Hart steps out of the car, his gaze cold and sharp, but his mind is in turmoil. He enters the store, a sense of unease still haunting him from the morning. When Hart enters, the doorbell rings, making the small shop feel more alive than ever. He looks around, his eyes stopping on the two twin girls standing at the counter, holding a loaf of bread, talking to the store owner. "Can we pay later?" "Our mother is sick at home," Nuna says in a gentle yet anxious voice. The girl's words echo through the quiet space of the store, causing Hart to pause for a moment, feeling a lump form in his throat. He never expected that in this world full of numbers and transactions, such a simple moment could have such a powerful effect on his heart. The story begins here when Hart, a successful yet lonely man, unknowingly touches another world, the world of poor and resilient children living in hardship but still holding on to faith and hope. The three main characters of the story, Hart, Nuna, and Niece, along with their mother Clara, will begin a journey to change each other's lives in a heartfelt tale of compassion, love, and transformation. The faint morning light filtered through the windows of the small grocery store, creating an unusually warm atmosphere amidst the quiet and simple space of the suburban street. Hart walked in, closed the car door behind him, and stood at the entrance like a stranger among the old goods' glaring neon lights and the smell of freshly baked bread mingled with the greasy scents typical of long-established stores. The unfamiliar feeling enveloped him, causing him to instinctively run his hand through his hair, trying to calm himself in the face of this simple environment. Everything here was so different from what he had known. He entered the store, but not to shop. His heart, although buried under the weight of work and shallow social relations, was somehow drawn here. It wasn't for a business deal, nor for an appointment promising profit or contracts. It was that strange feeling when he heard the doorbell chime and the sound of tiny footsteps, of two girls standing at the counter, whispering to the store owner. One of the girls, Nuna, looked up. Her eyes filled with worry. Both girls wore worn but still bright dresses. Nuna's dress had a stain on the lower right corner, while Niece's dress was a bit frayed at the collar. Despite being only 8 years old, their faces showed a maturity no child should have to endure. "Can we pay later?" Nuna asked, her voice cautious but optimistic. "Our mom is sick at home. We don't have enough money." The shopkeeper, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, looked at the girls with a mixture of annoyance and regret. "I'm sorry, but I can't make an exception. The rule I can't allow any debt." Nuna and Niece stood still, exchanging a silent glance full of empathy, as if in each other's eyes the entire world consisted of trust and love between the two sisters. Hart stood quietly in a corner, listening to their small conversation. Deep down, he felt a calling, a force that prevented him from just standing still and observing. He couldn't explain why he felt this way, but just looking into the eyes of the two girls, he knew he couldn't walk away. He walked toward the counter, feeling the shopkeeper's gaze on him, which was slightly annoyed, yet not entirely firm, as if waiting for someone to speak. Someone to break the wall she had built. Hart felt like he was stepping into a space that didn't belong to him, and this was one of those moments he couldn't ignore. "How much is the loaf of bread?" Hart asked, his voice firm. The shopkeeper looked at him for a moment, slightly surprised, but then replied, $3.25, sir." Without hesitation, Hart took a $20 bill from his wallet and placed it on the counter. Let the girls have this loaf of bread, I'll cover it all. Both the shopkeeper and the girls were surprised. The scene made Hart feel like an outsider watching a world he had never really understood. But that didn't matter. He didn't want to think too much about why he did it. What mattered was the feeling that urged him to act. Nuna and Niece looked at each other for a moment, then turned back to Hart. It seemed that in their eyes there was confusion mixed with unspoken gratitude. Nice, the shyer of the two, spoke first. "Thank you. Thank you, sir." Nuna stood still, her face serious, her eyes bright with sincere appreciation. "We'll pay you back when Mom gets better," she said softly but firmly. Hart felt a lump in his throat. Their words echoed in his mind, like something that had touched his cold, emotionless heart. His heart was tied to this simple moment, a moment he couldn't explain, but one that was truly important in his life. "No need to pay me back." Hart said, his voice softer, warmer than usual. "Keep it. It's fine." The two girls looked at him once more, then took the loaf of bread, their eyes filled with gratitude and surprise. Hart realized that what he had just done wasn't just helping two children. It was something he had never felt before: connection. As the two girls turned to leave, Hart watched them, but couldn't move right away. That strange feeling still clung to him, as if some invisible force was drawing him closer to the life he had long forgotten. He stood there gazing out the window as the first rays of sunlight hit the poor street, feeling as though something in that small world had changed inside him. After leaving the store, Hart didn't rush back to his luxury car. Instead, he walked aimlessly, his steps without any clear destination. In his mind, the images of Nuna and Niece kept swirling around, along with their words about paying back when their mother got better. He couldn't explain why such a small act made him feel like he had found something important, a feeling he had forgotten for so many years. He had once lived in a world full of power and success. But right now, the only thing he felt was a necessity, an invisible longing to change, to live more fully with the real values of life. He couldn't go back to his old life, couldn't return to the world he had built around himself. That world now seemed too distant, too disconnected from what he had just experienced in that small store, where there were poor children, but full of strength and kindness. Children whose hearts, though still small, held values Hart had never understood. As he walked out of the neighborhood, Hart suddenly realized that maybe life wasn't just about the numbers and success he had clung to, but about the connection between people. And what he had just experienced was the first sign of a new life, a life he had never thought he would have. Hart walked through the quiet space of the suburban street, the sun slowly shining on the old corners of the neighborhood, creating a peaceful stillness. He had once lived in the bustling neighborhoods of the big city, amid the never-ending rush of workers' commerce and the endless roads of success. But now he stood in a different world, where the simple things had become more important than ever. He suddenly realized that his heart no longer felt as empty as before. There was something, an invisible thread, pulling him closer to reality. He stopped in front of a small cafe at the corner. Soft music played from inside, blending with the laughter of a few customers sitting at tables. This cafe seemed to be a place where the locals of this neighborhood often came. He walked in, looked around, and chose a table near the window. The comfortable feeling was entirely different from the places he usually visited, where there was never any peace like this. Sitting down, Hart took out his phone and scrolled through work emails and notifications from partners. But he couldn't focus. The images of Nuna and Niece kept lingering in his mind. Their worried gaze when they asked the shopkeeper about paying later. The words, "Our mom is sick at home," still echoed in his mind. He had heard many stories about children living in poverty, but never had they felt as close and real as these. A part of his heart felt sorrow. The other part felt as if it were breaking apart from the empathy he had never known. Hart had everything he once thought was necessary for happiness, a luxurious penthouse meetings with famous people, lavish parties. But in all of that, he had never truly felt alive. The successes he had achieved seemed unable to fill the emptiness inside him. It was something he had never voiced, but now seeing those children, he suddenly realized what his life had been missing. After a while, Hart stood up, paid for his coffee, and walked outside. He didn't know what he was looking for, but there was an invisible pull that made him return to that grocery store. The feeling was so strong that he couldn't ignore it. This time, he didn't just want to help the girls once more. He wanted to do something truly meaningful. Nuna and Niece had just left the store, their eyes still fixed on the loaf of bread they were holding. Both girls felt confused, unsure of what to do next. Though they were happy to have received help from a stranger, they still worried about their mother. She was sick, and somehow this help was only temporary. These children had never faced an easy life, but they were strong and determined to do everything to protect their mother. Nuna pulled Niece into a small alley nearby. They both sat down, placing the loaf of bread between them, sharing the first bite, then quietly eating in silence. Nuna looked at her sister, her eyes full of determination. "Mom will get better. We just have to wait." Nice nodded, though her heart was still full of worry. "Are you sure, Mom? She hasn't said anything?" "I'm sure," Nuna emphasized. "We have to believe in Mom, little sister." The silence between the two sisters was suddenly broken by the sound of light footsteps from behind. Nuna looked up and saw Hart standing at the end of the alley. Both girls looked at each other, then looked back at Hart, unsure of what to do. At this point, Hart walked up to them, gently crouching down. "Hello, girls," Hart said, his voice gentle and sincere. "I've been thinking about you a lot after I left." Nuna looked at him, still filled with suspicion. "Why are you here?" Hart hesitated, then answered, "I just want to help you again. Does your mother need any support?" Nuna and Niece's eyes shifted, a mix of fear and doubt. But there was also a small flicker of hope. Nuna replied, still cautious, but feeling lighter. "Our mom doesn't want anyone's help." Hart sat down beside them slowly. "I understand that," he said. "But if you don't accept help from anyone, how can your mom get better? I just want to help you a little." A silence enveloped the small space between the three of them. Hart didn't say anything more, just looking at Nuna and Niece, leaving them to decide for themselves. But his words began to sink deep into their hearts. After a while, Nuna sighed, her eyes still filled with concern. "We won't accept your help. But thank you for caring about our mom." Hart smiled, no longer pressing. He stood up and quietly walked away, leaving the three of them in silence. He felt the rejection, but also something inside him had changed. What he hadn't realized at first was the sincerity in these children's hearts and how they had awakened something within him that he hadn't known existed. When Hart returned to his penthouse, he couldn't shake the image of the girls, the sincere and determined words they had spoken. In the lavish world he lived in, where financial decisions and power controlled everything, he realized he had overlooked the most precious thing: human connection, the genuine affection and concern he had never truly understood. He stood by the window, looking out at the vast city where everything seemed so distant and unreachable. He realized that despite having everything, what he truly needed was connection, a connection he had found today in the eyes of Nuna and Niece. He sighed and returned to his desk. The contracts, the deals, the meetings would always be there. But today, he knew that there was something more important than all of that. That was what he could do for these children, and that would not be easily forgotten. Spring was approaching, bringing with it a gentle breeze and warm rays of sunshine that filtered through the windows of Hart's penthouse. Yet in his heart, there was no warmth like those golden days. The work relationships, partner meetings, and contracts couldn't fill the void he felt. The images of Nuna and niece haunted him for days. Despite their smallness, these children possessed an inner strength that Hart had never recognized in himself. And that made his heart uneasy. Stepping into his office, Hart saw the financial reports, the dry numbers, and the emails marked urgent. He glanced over them indifferently. His company was thriving, but he felt as though he was drifting away from himself. Those children, Nuna and niece, had made him realize that despite having all the power and wealth, the important things in life lay where he had never paid attention: genuine affection and care for those around him. The next day, Hart decided to return to the suburban neighborhood, the place where he had first met Nuna and niece. He spent several hours that day researching the area, looking into information about the girl's mother, Clara. After a few calls to local social agencies and charities, he learned about Clara's living situation. Clara was a single mother struggling to raise her 2 daughters, but recently her health had deteriorated severely, preventing her from working regularly. Hart knew that without help from social organizations, Clara's and her children's lives would become even harder. Though he knew this wasn't his responsibility, Hart felt a sense of duty weighing on him. He couldn't sit idly by knowing that children were growing up in such an environment deprived of love and care. Hart drove back to the suburban neighborhood again. But this time he wasn't just visiting the 2 girls. He was there to truly understand their lives. When his car stopped in front of Clara's house, his heart sank. It was a small house, nothing special, with an old roof and a small garden simply maintained. But inside, Hart knew there was another story unfolding, one of resilience and love. He stepped out of the car, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door. His heart raced, not from worry about work, but from what he was about to face. He wanted to find a way to help this family, but he didn't know where to start. When he knocked on the door, Hart heard footsteps inside, and then Clara appeared at the door. She stared at him for a long moment, as if searching for his reason for visiting. Clara was a woman who looked weary, yet her strength still shone through. The wrinkles on her face were the marks of long, hard days. Yet her eyes held a determination that Hart couldn't ignore. "Hello, Clara," Hart said gently, trying to appear natural. "I'm Hart, the one who helped Nuna and niece the other day. I thought we could talk for a moment." Clara remained silent for a while, her eyes seemingly not fully trusting him. She wasn't used to receiving help from strangers. Life had taught her to stand on her own, and she wasn't quick to accept help from anyone. "Please come in," Clara finally said, stepping aside to let Hart enter. "I think you have your own reasons for being here." Hart stepped inside the small house and immediately felt the warmth in the air despite the family's struggles. The simple drawings by the girls hung on the walls, rustic tables and chairs, and old but neatly arranged household items. Everything in this house contained love, but it also had an abundance of scarcity. Clara led him to the living room where Nuna and niece were playing on the floor, piecing together a puzzle. When they saw Hart, the girls looked up, but didn't seem surprised. They simply gazed at him with eyes full of curiosity, unsure of what to make of this strange man. "I'm here to talk to you about the girls and your situation," Hart began, but he could feel the tension in the room. Clara looked at him, then motioned for the girls to leave the room. After they left, Clara turned to Hart, her eyes full of suspicion. "You want to help my family, don't you?" Clara asked, her voice cold but cautious. "You think you can help us when we've never needed help from anyone?" Hart knew he had to explain himself more clearly. He understood that Clara had fought on her own for many years, and she had reason to feel this way. "I don't mean to intrude," Hart said, "but I've seen how the girls care for you, and I feel that I need to do something to help. I'm not one to interfere in others' affairs, but this time I want to do something that really matters." Clara looked at him with a puzzled expression, then sighed. We survive thanks to small odd jobs and the little money I can earn. I don't need anything. I just want a chance to work normally without anyone worrying or helping." "I understand," Hart said, sensing the pride and resilience in Clara's words. "I just want to make sure that you and the girls don't have to suffer anymore. If I can, I'll find a way to help without making you feel your dignity is lost." Clara was silent for a while, as though considering his words. Finally, she nodded gently. "I don't know what to say, but if you truly want to help, I won't oppose it." Hart knew the first step had been successful. He didn't want to do anything flashy, but a better life for this family wasn't just a dream for the children. It was Clara's survival. And he unexpectedly realized that he wasn't just a rich man trying to do charity. He felt that these children, these people had truly changed him. The subsequent conversations between Hart and Clara opened up a new journey, not just for him, but for all of them. Hart's heart, once hard and cold, began to feel warmer, opening up to more genuine relationships. Hart left with a renewed sense of determination. Those children, along with their mother, were no longer just people he had helped once again. They were the reason he no longer felt alone in his life. The simplest things, a loaf of bread, a sincere word, had awakened him and led him on a new journey full of meaning and humanity. Hart returned to his penthouse, but this time he didn't feel the satisfaction he usually did. The paintings and lavish mementos in the large room could not chase away the restlessness in his heart. He couldn't stop thinking about Clara, about Nuna and Nice, and the way Clara looked at him when she opened the door. Her eyes contained exhaustion, worry, and sometimes doubt. But there was also something else, a glimmer of hope, as though a faint ray of hope was shining into their lives. As he walked into the living room, Hart sat down in his luxurious black leather chair, his fingers interlaced in confusion. His mind still couldn't escape the image of the girls, especially when Clara said she didn't want any help if it would make her lose her dignity. Those words echoed in his head. As a man who had succeeded in business and had learned how to build financial empires from numbers, Hart had always believed he could control everything. But here in front of a strong woman like Clara and children struggling to survive, he felt small. It seemed that among all the wealth and power he had forgotten the truly important things in life. The next morning, Hart woke up earlier than usual. He didn't follow his usual routine of checking his phone or looking at financial reports. Instead, he decided to take a walk around the city, hoping he would find some peace. After all, he had realized that work wasn't the only thing that made him feel alive. He needed to do something more meaningful. He drove to the suburban neighborhood he had visited before. The excitement surged in his chest again. But this time it wasn't anxiety or confusion. It was a resolve to change something in his life. When he approached Clara's small house, his heart began to beat faster. Every step he took seemed to pull him closer to those children, to the images he couldn't shake from his mind. When he stood before the door of the house, he was no longer the powerful, wealthy man of meetings and deals. He was just a man wanting to do the right thing, to bring a little light into someone else's life. Clara opened the door when she heard the bell ring. Seeing Hart standing in front of her, she was a little surprised, but she didn't show the discomfort or doubt she had before. She stepped outside, her gaze cautious but also curious. "What are you doing here?" Clara asked, her voice somewhat sharp but not too firm. Hart looked at her, a moment of hesitation flashing in his eyes. "I know I'm not part of your world, but I've thought a lot about your family, about the girls. And I want to help, not out of pity, but because I feel like I can do something meaningful." Clara looked at him for a long time without speaking. In those silent moments, Hart felt the exhaustion in every line of her face, but also the resilience she had carried all these years. Help, Clara repeated, her eyes not hiding the skepticism. Do you think helping us will change anything? Sometimes help just complicates things more. Hart remained silent, not contradicting her words. He understood that those words were the result of the wounds Clara had endured in the past. She was a woman who had fought to protect herself and her family, and now she wasn't easily accepting help from anyone. I'm not here to change everything. Hart said, his voice gentler than before. I just want to help in a way that's gentle without pressure, without making you feel like you're losing your dignity. If you don't want to accept help, I understand. But I won't turn back if you don't want me to. Clara looked at him for another moment. Then she sighed, as if considering something. How do you want to help? She asked, her voice softening slightly. I've spoken with a few local organizations, and I want to help with your family's monthly living expenses and with your health care. That's a way I think could help, without making you feel pressured or losing your dignity. Hart explained clearly. And if you don't want direct money, I can help you find a lighter job, something with flexible hours so you can take care of the girls. Clara stood still for a moment. Maybe this was something she had never considered, or at least hadn't thought that a man like Hart would come to help without expecting anything in return. She didn't know what to say. Maybe her resilience had made her live in solitude for too long, without daring to believe in kindness from others. Finally, Clara nodded slowly, but decisively. I'll try. Just try, she said, her eyes no longer filled with doubt. Hart smiled for the first time, feeling relieved in days. He wasn't a savior, and he didn't intend to become one. But today, he had done something right. He had brought hope to a family he didn't know. And that was all he needed. From that day on, Hart began visiting Clara's family once a week. Each time, he didn't show up in luxurious clothes or with expensive cars. He simply came to talk, to hear the stories of the girls, to help Clara with the daily tasks she couldn't manage on her own. The relationship between him and Clara's family gradually became natural, without force, without pity. He realized that in his life, what he truly needed wasn't the heights of his career, but sincere relationships, people who truly needed love and care. From then on, Hart made a decision he had never thought of before. Instead of sitting at the top and observing life from afar, he would truly live his life through connection and love with those around him. Spring seemed to have arrived long ago. Yet the atmosphere in Clara's small house remained one of gloom and silence. Despite the gentle rays of sunshine streaming through the windows, warm and soft, the weather could not ease the burdens Clara carried. As a single mother, she bore the weight of everything from caring for her children to worrying about every meal and every night's sleep. She had grown accustomed to this difficult life and had learned to face each hardship with resilience. But now something had begun to change, and even she couldn't explain the feeling. Each time Hart visited her, worries resurfaced. Clara was not one to easily accept help from others. She had grown used to overcoming challenges on her own, facing obstacles without needing anyone's assistance. But Hart was different. He was not just a wealthy man. He brought things she had never considered: sincere words, small acts of kindness, and gestures filled with goodwill. But she didn't know how to accept that help. One weekend morning, Clara sat in the kitchen, her gaze directed out the window where children were playing in the park nearby. The laughter of the children echoed into the quiet of the house. But Clara couldn't join in their joy. Her heart remained heavy, pressing down with every step she took. Nuna and niece were sitting on the sofa with drawing books in their hands. Though they tried to talk to each other, their eyes could not hide the concern they felt for their mother. Clara turned back to look at the two daughters she loved more than anything in the world. Despite the difficulties of life, she always tried to show them that they had nothing to worry about, that she would always protect them. Sister Nuna looked up, her eyes full of concern. "Are you okay?" Clara smiled, but her smile couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "I'm fine, don't worry about me." But Nuna didn't completely believe her. She stared at her mother, her hands tightly gripping her drawing book. "I'm really worried about you." Clara smiled again, trying to ease her daughter's worries. "Don't worry, I'm fine. You just need to focus on your studies and play happily. Don't worry about me." Despite her words, Clara's heart couldn't be as light as her speech. Their mother had been ill for a long time, and even though she had tried to hide her fatigue, her body was growing weaker. She couldn't continue working so hard without rest, but she didn't want her children to bear any more hardships. Suddenly, the door opened, and Hart walked in carrying a bag of snacks and a few small gifts. He smiled at Clara and greeted the girls. "Hello, girls. Did you have fun today?" Nuna and Nice looked at Hart with friendly but somewhat shy eyes. They had started to get used to Hart's visits, but there was still something unspoken in their hearts. Clara stood up, her exhaustion still visible. She looked at Hart and gave a small smile. "You've come." "Yes, I brought some snacks for you," Hart said, placing the bag on the table. "And I also wanted to talk to you for a moment." Clara glanced at him before turning to the girls, signaling them to keep playing. She walked into the kitchen with Hart, a small but cozy space. "What is it?" Clara asked, her voice slightly tense. "I just want to ask you one more time," Hart said, his voice gentle. "Would you accept help from me, Nun? Not out of pity, but because I genuinely want to help." Clara stood silently for a moment, her gaze avoiding his. "I've already told you I don't need anyone's help. I can take care of my family." Hart looked at her, not in a hurry. He knew this wasn't the first time Clara had rejected his offer, but he didn't want her to feel forced. "I understand," Hart said softly, "but I just want you to understand that we don't always have to do everything by ourselves. Sometimes we need help to overcome difficulties." Clara remained silent, not responding. She knew Hart was sincere, but that didn't make it any easier for her to accept help. Her resilience and pride had made her refuse his offers, even though a part of her wanted to accept. "I don't want to lose my dignity," Clara said, her voice growing firmer. "I can't live like someone who's depending on others, even just a little." Hart looked at her with patience. "I don't think you would be depending on others. You're a strong mother doing everything for your children. I just want you not to have to carry everything alone." Clara turned away, her heart a little shaken. "If I accept your help, what will my children think? They won't understand. They'll see me as weak." "You are an amazing mother," Hart replied. His voice warm, "and the girls will understand. They just want to see you healthy and happy." Clara didn't say anything more. She felt a part of her wanting to accept, but another part resisting. Her heart was at odds with her mind, and she didn't know what to do. In the following days, Hart continued visiting Clara's family, but he never forced her to accept help. He simply showed up doing small things like taking the girls to school, helping Clara with household chores, and creating space for her to breathe. Clara remained resolute in refusing Hart's help, but her resilience gradually revealed a fatigue within her. She couldn't live forever with such hardness, constantly carrying everything by herself. At times, Clara felt she truly needed a hand to pull her up from the hardships. But deep inside, she feared that accepting help would mean losing the strength she had worked so hard to build. One day, Hart visited again. He brought a bouquet of fresh flowers and a gift of toys for the girls. When Clara opened the door, he simply smiled gently. "I won't say anything more," Hart said, his voice warm and sincere. "I just want you to know I'm always here to help." Clara looked at him, then turned back inside. She didn't say anything, but this time something inside her had changed. Her resilience was still there, but it had softened by the sincerity of Hart's actions. And that perhaps would be the first step for her to accept that sometimes strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's knowing when to accept help and when to allow herself to be loved. Summer had arrived, bringing with it scorching days and cool breezes from the sea that swept into the city. From the windows of his high-rise penthouse, Hart looked down upon the bustling streets, the towering skyscrapers, and the hurried people going about their busy lives. In his world, everything moved at a rapid pace, yet every time he looked toward the suburban neighborhood, he had visited a sense of peace washed over him. Perhaps it was the simplicity and the sincere hearts of people like Clara and her children that he truly needed. Though Hart had visited Clara and her family several times, he had never directly offered assistance. He understood that for Clara, such offers might make her feel pressured, as though she weren't strong enough to face her struggles on her own. So Hart decided to help her family in a quiet way, without expecting thanks, recognition, or acknowledgement, just small actions to make their lives a little easier. That day, Hart arrived while Clara was working hard in the kitchen, preparing dinner for the children. Clara's home was still as simple as ever, but the care she put into it made it warm and full of love. Nuna and Niece were playing quietly in the living room, drawing pictures, occasionally laughing together. When Clara heard the knock on the door and saw Hart standing there, she gave a slight smile. "You're here?" Clara asked gently, though her voice still held a touch of caution. "Yeah, I brought some things for you," Hart replied, his voice calm, gentle, and warm. He walked in, placing bags of food and a few gifts on the table. The girls ran into the living room, their eyes lighting up when they saw the food Hart had brought. Clara watched him for a moment before turning back to her work in the kitchen. "Thank you, but you know we don't need anyone's help," she said, her voice tired but still full of resilience. "You know," Hart said, looking toward Clara in the kitchen, "I'm not here to be a bother. I just wanted to help a little, not out of pity, but because I feel I might be able to do something." Clara didn't respond, but something stirred in her heart. She didn't want Hart to think she was weak, nor did she want him to pity her. Clara had learned to live on her own, facing hardships without relying on anyone. But she couldn't deny that sometimes loneliness made her weary. It was Hart's quiet actions that made her feel like she wasn't completely abandoned. In the following weeks, Hart didn't show up as suddenly as he had before. He didn't come every day. Instead, he would occasionally visit on weekend evenings, when the girls were asleep and Clara felt too tired to continue with her work. Hart helped clean the kitchen, wipe down the stains on the table, or even assisted the girls with their homework. These small actions, though seemingly insignificant, carried great weight because Clara knew these were not acts done to seek recognition, but because of true kindness. One day, as Clara was tidying up the living room, Hart walked in and handed her a bag. "I bought some things for the girls. Hope they like them." Clara looked into the bag, finding new clothes and toys the girls would enjoy. "I don't need new things," Clara said, her tone firm but slightly uneasy. "We don't need anything too extravagant." "You don't understand," Hart said gently. "This isn't about me trying to buy your affection. I just want you to know that sometimes some things don't have to be bought. They just need a little affection, a little care." Clara looked at him and then back at the bag. She realized that sometimes her life was too challenging to even worry about things like this. She had grown too accustomed to trying to do everything herself. But now there was a man standing before her, asking for nothing, just wanting to help in a real way. The next morning, Clara woke up earlier than usual. She felt tired, but there was something oddly comforting in her heart. Perhaps it was Hart's quiet help that made her feel like she wasn't alone anymore. While preparing breakfast for the girls, Clara received a call from a nearby hospital. It was a notification that a charity organization had agreed to sponsor her medical treatment. It was surely Hart who had helped. A wave of gratitude rose within Clara, but she couldn't easily accept it. She didn't want to be a burden to anyone. She had lived through difficult times without asking for anyone's help, but now that things were beginning to change, Clara felt she couldn't keep living in that resilient shell forever. That afternoon, when Hart visited as usual, Clara sat down and looked at him with a gentler expression. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking after so much silence. "I know you've done a lot for our family, but I can't just accept help like that. I don't want my children to think their mother is weak." Hart sat next to her, saying nothing, simply listening. He knew that helping someone like Clara wasn't easy, but he also understood that sometimes people just need to know they aren't alone, and that there are others who truly want to help. "You're not weak," Hart said softly. "You're just a strong mother, and sometimes strong mothers need help too. You don't have to do it all alone." Clara lifted her head, looking at him for a moment before nodding. "I don't know what to do, but thank you for always being here." Hart smiled, then stood up. "Just know I'll always be here. And that's not because I want to help you. It's because I really want to be a part of your life and the girls' lives." Clara looked at him, feeling as if a part of her heart had opened. Though it wasn't easy for her to accept help, she knew that sometimes accepting help was the first step to not having to face everything alone. With his quiet acts of kindness, Hart had changed Clara's life and her family's. He didn't need to make grand promises or give long explanations. The small things he did were enough for Clara to feel his genuine heart, and gradually she began to trust in it. In this world, some things can't be bought with money, and human connection is one of them. The penthouse where Hart lived still radiated opulence, with expensive paintings adorning the walls, luxurious furniture, and large windows that opened to the view of the city. This had once been the space he considered perfect, where he felt safe and proud. But recently, every time he entered that vast room, he felt a sense of isolation, as if he were standing in a space devoid of life, without the warmth of human connection. Though he had everything many people dreamed of, money, power, and success in his career, his heart felt empty. Each morning, Hart woke up mechanically, continuing with meetings, handling work, and making decisions that rarely felt deeply meaningful. He had built his empire from numbers and successful deals. But gradually he realized that those things couldn't fill the void inside him. He no longer felt happiness as he once had, nor did he feel fulfillment in his work or life. The only thing that made him feel valuable was the connection with real people, people like Clara and her children, Nuna and Niece. Since meeting Clara and her family, Hart had changed a great deal. He was no longer the man solely focused on work and success. He had started to view life differently, valuing the smallest things, genuine glances, kind words, quiet acts of assistance. Whether it was helping Clara clean the kitchen, taking the kids to school, or simply sitting and talking with them, Hart realized those moments were what truly mattered. That day, as Hart sat in his office, an overwhelming sense of exhaustion hit him. Everything in front of him suddenly seemed blurred, as if the things he once thought were important no longer held value. Every transaction, every meeting, every signed contract felt meaningless. He felt like he was chasing goals without understanding why. He recalled the first time he met Clara. Back then, and he had simply wanted to help her. But gradually he realized that his acts of kindness were not just simple gestures, but a transformation in how he viewed life. Clara and her children had taught him things he never thought about throughout his life. The love of family sacrifice and Clara's resilience had changed the way he saw true values in life. Hart put his pen down, paused his work, and leaned back in his chair. He began to reflect on the most important things he had never paid attention to. It wasn't money or fame. It was real relationships, the sharing of love and caring for those around him. He realized that perhaps he needed to change not just in his work, but in his personal life as well. Returning to Clara's home, Hart walked in with a different sense of ease. He no longer felt like an outsider. He had truly become a part of this family's life. On evenings when he sat down for dinner with Clara and the children chatting about the simple things in life, he felt that this was where he truly belonged. Clara's simple meals, the innocent stories of the kids, all of it made him feel warm and happy. One evening, as Hart and Clara sat drinking tea after dinner, Clara looked at him and said, "You've changed, Hart. You're not the person I met at first." Hart looked at her, his gaze gentle and thoughtful. "I realize that too. I've spent too long living in a world I didn't truly understand, not truly living. What I've been looking for isn't numbers or success in business. I've been searching for real connection with people." Clara nodded, her eyes filled with deep empathy. "You haven't just helped us, you've helped yourself. Sometimes we need to learn how to open our hearts so that good things can come to us." Hart didn't say anything further. He understood that it was the small, quiet acts of kindness that brought true change in life. He started to realize that when we live for others, when we care about real relationships, that is when we truly live. From then on, Hart decided to shift his career focus. He began dedicating time to community projects, engaging in charitable activities, and helping those less fortunate. He also reduced his involvement in business ventures that didn't bring real value to life. Each morning, instead of rushing into meetings, he took time to visit poor families, help orphaned children, and share life stories. One day, while working at a community support center, Hart received a call from Clara. She told him that Nuna and niece had received full scholarships from a good school in the city, and Clara wanted to thank him for all the quiet help he had given to their family. Upon hearing this, Hart felt a wave of happiness and fulfillment. He realized that though his actions had been small, they had brought significant change to the lives of others, and that was what made him truly happy. Returning to his life, Hart realized that this change was not something sudden, but a gradual process. He no longer rushed through endless meetings or believed that money and power were everything. He learned to slow down, to appreciate simple moments, and to enjoy real relationships. Together with Clara and the children, Hart found joy in the simplest things: a family meal, an afternoon walk in the park, or peaceful moments spent together. That was the true happiness he had found, and he knew he no longer needed to keep running after the world outside. From that day, Hart's life was no longer just about numbers or pieces of power. His life was about the people he loved, genuine relationships, and small but meaningful acts. Deep in his heart, he knew that this change was what truly brought him the happiness and peace he had never experienced before. In the months that followed, Hart's life underwent significant changes he never expected. He was no longer the man with endless meetings or long nights dedicated to achieving another goal or signing another contract. Now he found joy in simple things, listening to Clara's stories, helping the children with their schoolwork, and doing small things he never imagined he would do. Hart had started engaging in charitable work, but not in the way most people thought of wealthy individuals in society. He didn't organize large charity events or participate in flashy projects to enhance his image. Instead, he chose more modest actions, visiting poor families, helping children in need, or simply sitting and talking with people he met at community centers. These actions didn't require much money or fame, but they gave him a sense of connection he had never experienced before. It was a feeling of true sincerity, of genuine connection with people. One of the things he did most was help families in need, like Clara's family. Every week, Hart spent time visiting them. He helped with fixing things around the house, bought necessary items, and sometimes he simply sat and had tea with Clara, chatting with the kids about their school stories or their dreams. Every time Clara looked at him with grateful eyes, but he could sense her resilience. Clara never easily accepted help, and he didn't want to force it. His actions were simply meant to show her family that they weren't alone in this world. One weekend afternoon, when Hart visited Clara's family, he saw her sitting outside, her hands busy picking up dry leaves. He walked over, handing her a fresh bouquet of flowers he had just bought from a nearby shop. "You came without warning again." Clara smiled lightly, her eyes a bit surprised when she saw Hart bring flowers. "I just wanted to bring something fresh for this lovely atmosphere," Hart said, his voice full of care. "And I also wanted to ask if you needed help with anything today." Clara placed the bouquet on the table, looking at Hart with a hint of suspicion. She had become used to doing everything on her own, but his words now carried something that truly made her hesitate. She knew Hart had helped her family a lot already, but this time it might be a further step, a change she wasn't ready to accept. "You've helped too much already. I can't keep accepting help like this," Clara said, her voice a bit hesitant. Hart sat beside her, looking at the leaves falling gently to the ground. "You don't need to worry about this. I'm not here because of pity. I'm here because I want to help. That's something I feel I need to do, not just for you, but for myself." Clara fell silent, her heart struggling with conflicting thoughts. She couldn't deny that Hart's help was a good thing, but she was afraid that if she kept accepting it, she would lose her dignity. She didn't want to be someone dependent on others. "You don't have to accept help because you feel guilty," Hart said, recognizing the conflict in her. "This help is not because I think you're weak. It's because I believe you truly deserve a better life." Clara turned to look at him, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't know what to say, because his words truly made her feel understood. A part of her wanted to thank him, but another part was afraid that this would make her feel like she was weakening herself. But then she realized that if she didn't accept this help, she would live forever in solitude, carrying everything on her own. "Thank you, Hart," Clara said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. But you've done so much for my family, and I don't want to be a burden to you anymore." Hart smiled gently. "You're not a burden, Clara. You're a wonderful mother, and everything you've done for your children is something I deeply respect. Just know that I'm here, and I'll always be here, not because I feel responsible, but because I truly care about you and your family." With his quiet acts of kindness, Hart gradually made life easier for Clara and her family. The tasks she had to do every day were no longer burdens because she knew someone was always there to help when needed. The family meals, the simple conversations in the evening, everything became moments of happiness she never thought she would experience. And every time she saw Nuna and Niece laughing happily, Clara felt truly fortunate. Meanwhile, Hart also felt the significant change within himself. His heart, once hardened and cold for so many years, now had a warmth he had never known before. He no longer felt like just a successful businessman, a man of power and wealth. He felt like part of Clara's family, and that was a feeling he had never experienced before. Every time he saw the children's smiles, heard them talk about their school stories, or simply sat with Clara, he realized that the most important thing in life was the connection with those around us, the love and genuine care we share. Both Clara and Hart understood that they didn't need to change themselves to become the person society expected. They just needed to be themselves, and when they were together, they could share joys, sorrows, hopes, and dreams without fear of being hurt or rejected. That was the true change in Hart's life. He no longer found happiness in work or success, but in real relationships, in the love he shared with Clara's family. And above all, he knew that this was the life he truly wanted to have. Autumn had arrived with dry yellow leaves falling on the streets, painting a serene picture between the modern, bustling city. Hart felt the change in the air, not just because of the weather, but because of the changes happening in his life. Although life continued to move forward with endless work, new plans and more business deals, his heart had now found a peace he had never experienced before. One morning, Hart woke up later than usual. The soft light of the sun filtered through the window and bathed his large room in a warm glow. He didn't feel rushed as before, no longer tense with the need to attend meetings, nor weary from the constant calls from partners. Instead, he felt comfortable and relaxed, as if he had truly found purpose in his life. His heart no longer beat to the rhythm of career and personal success. Now he felt joy in being with Clara's family, seeing the smiles of the children Nuna and Niece, and sharing peaceful moments together. He understood that his life had been reshaped by love and genuine connection, things he had never considered before. That day, Hart decided to spend the entire day with Clara and her children. He knew that each visit was not just about bringing gifts or offering help, but truly wanting to understand their lives, to share in their joys and sorrows. When he arrived, Clara was sitting on the couch in the living room, her eyes tired but filled with resilience. Nuna and Niece were playing on the floor occasionally, looking toward Hart with bright smiles. Clara stood when she saw him, a look of joy spreading across her face. "You're here," Clara said, her voice gentle but still tinged with a hint of caution. "Yes, I came to visit you and the kids." Hart smiled, walking in and placing a bag of new toys and a few dinner items on the table. "Thank you," Clara said, her voice hesitant. "But I really don't want to trouble you too much." "It's no trouble," Hart replied warmly, his voice sincere. "You've done so much for the kids now. It's my turn to do something for you." Clara looked at him for a moment, and she felt something unfamiliar stirring within her. She had become so used to handling everything on her own. But Hart's actions made her realize that sometimes it was okay to accept help from others. She didn't need to do everything by herself. "Thank you, really," Clara said, moved by Hart's sincerity. That day, Hart and Clara prepared dinner together. Nuna and Niece played as their parents worked in the kitchen. Hart had never felt this way before. The feeling of sharing small tasks in life, of helping in a genuine way, without any ulterior motive, was something he had never experienced in his tense business-driven life. When dinner was ready, they gathered around the table, and the laughter of the kids lit up the room. Clara looked at Hart, her eyes shining with joy, a peace she never thought she would experience. "Do you see?" Clara said, "I think it's been too long since I sat down for a real meal like this. The meals before were just rushed ones to get through the day, but now everything really has meaning." Hart looked at Clara, his gaze full of empathy and sincerity. He knew that he wasn't just helping materially, but more importantly, he had helped her rediscover the real values in life, values she had forgotten in the struggle to survive. With each passing day, Hart noticed himself changing. He was no longer the man who only knew work meetings and contracts. He had found joy in the simplest things, in caring for others and sharing with those around him. His life was no longer a series of long days focused on achieving his set goals. Now he lived for the truly happy moments spent with Clara's family. Hart began participating in more community activities. He joined Clara and the children in visiting poor families, helping orphan children, and organizing charity fundraisers for children's centers. He realized these actions didn't just change the lives of others, they changed him as well. He felt that what he was doing was right, that it was how he could give back what life had given him. One afternoon, as Hart sat in the park with the kids watching them play and laugh innocently, he felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. He no longer felt the loneliness he once did, no longer felt lost among people he never truly understood. "Do you feel happy?" Nuna asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. Hart smiled, looking into her innocent eyes. "Yes, I feel very happy to be here with you." Nice jumped up and said, "You're part of our family now. You're not a guest, you have to stay with us forever." Hart felt warmth flooding his heart. The children's words felt like an affirmation that he had truly become part of their family. No longer an outsider, he was an irreplaceable part of their lives. Day by day, Hart felt that his life now wasn't just about work, but about sincere relationships and the love he received from Clara and the children. He knew that what he had been searching for was not fame or money, but a family, a place where he could truly find peace. One evening, as Clara's family sat together, Hart realized that he was no longer alone. Not only had he found a new family, but he had found himself in these loving relationships. No matter how busy or chaotic the world outside was, he knew that with these people, he had found where he truly belonged. "I will be here forever," Hart thought to himself as he looked into Clara's eyes and those of the children. Though he didn't know what the future held, Hart understood that his life was no longer simply about success or numbers. It was about simple moments, about the love he had found in a new family. With these changes, Hart had found a different path, a path that led him to true happiness. And he knew that no matter what the future brought, he would always walk alongside this family with the genuine relationships he had found. Sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the most unexpected places. Hart, Clara, and her daughters have shown us that true happiness isn't measured by wealth or success, but by the love and connections we share with others. If you felt moved by this story, remember, it's the small acts of kindness that can change everything. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear more inspiring stories like this. And as always, share this video with someone who might need a reminder that kindness truly changes lives. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones we least expect.